The sun sank low behind the mesas, its light spilling across the desert in molten streams of amber, gilding the grasses by the riverbank until they glowed as though set aflame. The evening wind whispered against the water's surface, carrying with it the smell of earth, sage, and the quiet promise of night. A lone rider moved slowly along the river's curve, his horse weary, its hooves heavy in the shallows. The man upon its back carried himself with the stillness of someone who had seen more than he ever cared to recall. His face, lined by 35 years of dust and silence, bore the weariness of choices made and lives left behind. He was not a hero to anyone, nor did he expect to be. Then came the sound, sharp and desperate, a splash that tore through the gentle murmur of the current. He halted, his eyes scanning the reeds. Another sound followed, frantic, like the flight of a bird caught in a storm. Without thought, he swung down from the saddle, boots sinking into the cold water, and saw her. She thrashed against the current, her hair slick with river water. Black strands plastered her face as though the river meant to claim her. A single feather, once proud, now drooped heavy at the back of her head, and the bright threadwork of her dress tangled like weeds beneath the surface. Her arms flailed, then weakened, and for an instant she vanished beneath the water's skin. The man lunged forward, the current pushing hard against his thighs, seizing her just as the river tried to pull her under for good. She felt weightless and heavy all at once, a body filled with resistance and surrender. With effort, he drew her to the bank. Water streaming from her limbs like broken glass, scattered in the last light of day. She coughed, her chest heaving, drawing ragged breaths. Her eyes opened, dark and sharp even in exhaustion, and they fixed on him with a gaze that carried more accusation than gratitude. He held her gently, waiting for her strength to return. For a moment neither spoke. Only the sound of the river filled the silence between them, steady as a heartbeat. When she finally pushed herself upright, her voice, soft yet edged with iron, carried the cadence of someone who did not beg for survival, but demanded to know why she had been given it. He said nothing at first, only looked back at her with eyes like storm clouds waiting to break. At last, he answered that no one should be taken by the river before their time. His words were plain, stripped of poetry, yet something within them made her lips press into a thin line, not quite distrust, not quite acceptance. As the last embers of daylight faded, riders emerged from the distance, their silhouettes cutting sharp against the horizon. Warriors, their horses swift, their bows slung, their eyes suspicious. They dismounted in a rush, surrounding the stranger with the wariness of men who had seen too many intrusions on their land. The woman, now steadier, raised her hand, signaling restraint. Her words, spoken in their tongue, carried both authority and defiance. The men relented, but their eyes never left him. They led him to their village, where fires burned low and children's laughter mingled with the crackling wood. The man stayed at the edge, seated in shadow, his presence tolerated but unwelcomed. Across the flames, the woman sat among her people, her hair still damp, her feather now dry in the heat of the fire. She glanced toward him at intervals, her expression unreadable, as though measuring his worth in silence. Later, the chief arrived, tall and unbending, his face carved from the same stone as the mesas that guarded the horizon. He looked upon the cowboy with the piercing eyes of a man who bore both the burden of his people and the suspicion of strangers. Words passed between them, few and heavy. The chief acknowledged the saving of his daughter's life, but his tone was not warm. It was watchful, cautious. He asked what the cowboy sought in return. The man replied with quiet resolve that he sought nothing. His act had been no more than what any soul should do for another. Yet the air hung heavy with more than gratitude. The chief's silence pressed like a storm cloud waiting to break, and though no reward was spoken that night, there lingered a promise, unformed and dangerous, that such a debt could not remain unmarked. The fire dimmed to embers. The daughter, now stronger, combed her hair in the pale wash of moonlight, every movement measured and deliberate. The cowboy sat apart, his eyes drawn again to the river, hearing in its endless song both the memory of her near drowning and the weight of what it had already set into motion. In that moment, though he could not name it, he felt the current of his life shifting, carrying him towards something he had not sought yet could not avoid. And as the moon climbed higher, the story stood poised on the edge of change, like the river itself, restless and waiting. The days that followed moved like slow water, steady and watchful. The cowboy remained among the people, his presence a question none dared answer aloud. He rose each dawn with the mist, tending his horse by the river, while eyes in the shadows followed his every motion. Though no bonds tied him to the village, something unseen held him there, the same unseen force that had drawn him into the river's current to save the chief's daughter. She, too, lingered by the waterside, her step silent, her gaze sharp as a hawk's. There was no gratitude in her manner, not yet, but neither was there disdain. She studied him as one might study a storm at the edge of the horizon, uncertain whether it would bring rain or ruin. Their conversations were sparse, built of fragments. She asked about the places he had ridden through, the trails that stretched beyond the mesas. He spoke little, his words stripped bare, yet each answer carried the weight of someone who had lived long with silence as his only companion. Trust did not come swiftly, nor did it come evenly. Some within the village whispered that his presence brought ill fortune. Among them, a young warrior whose pride had long tied him to the chief's daughter carried his bitterness like a drawn blade. His eyes followed the cowboy with unhidden contempt, as though waiting for the moment he might prove what he already believed, that no outsider could be trusted with their blood. The woman heard these murmurs, and though her face betrayed nothing, a quiet tension coiled around her. She had nearly drowned in the river, but it was not water that threatened her now. It was choice, heavy and unyielding. On a night when the fires burned bright and the people gathered, the chief rose, his voice carrying over the circle with the gravity of stone-breaking stillness. He spoke of honor, of debts not left unanswered. Before all, he declared that the man who had saved his daughter would not leave unrewarded. What is greater than silver, greater than horses, he asked, than to offer the hand of his daughter in union? His words stilled the air, silenced the flames, as though even the fire itself leaned in to listen. The cowboy's chest tightened. He had not come to take, had not dreamed of reward, and yet the chief's decree hung over him like a noose fashioned from gratitude. His eyes turned to her, the daughter, her face unreadable, her dark gaze cast downward but burning with thought. The silence that followed was sharper than any knife. At last he spoke, his voice low but steady. He did not wish to claim her, he said, not as payment nor as prize. If her heart chose him, let it be her own, not a gift from her father, not a debt repaid. The words left him bare, vulnerable before them all, yet in that moment he would rather stand in truth than bind himself to honor stained by duty. The daughter rose then, her posture straight, her voice carrying clear across the gathered circle. She said she was no possession, no offering to be bartered. She was alive because of the cowboy, yes, but life was not something to be exchanged like cattle. She chose, with her own will, to stand beside the man who had seen her not as a debt to be claimed but as a woman with a soul unbroken. Her declaration rippled through the gathering like a stone cast into still water, sending waves that unsettled all who heard. The young warrior could bear no more. Fury ignited him, and he lunged forward, steel flashing in the firelight. The crowd gasped, but before blood could be drawn, the daughter stepped between them, her figure cutting sharp against the flames. Her eyes, fierce and unyielding, held the warrior frozen. She told him love could not be demanded, nor loyalty commanded. It must be earned, or it was nothing but chains. The chief's hand lifted, his presence silencing the uproar. He looked long upon his daughter, then at the cowboy, and though his face was stern, a flicker of respect passed like a shadow across stone. With a nod, he gave his blessing, not to a bargain, but to a choice freely spoken. The cowboy reached for her hand, his fingers brushing hers not in triumph but reverence, as though he were touching something too fragile to keep. Around them, the murmurs faded, the fire softened, and above them the stars stretched wide, endless and waiting. The river whispered in the darkness beyond, carrying its song into night, a reminder that every current leads somewhere unseen. And though the village stilled, though the decision seemed sealed, a quiet sense lingered in the air, like the final note of a song unfinished, that this was not the end, but only the opening of a path neither had yet imagined,